Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most startling developments to come out of Eastern Europe in recent years, a revolt from within the Belarusian military. That's right, for the first time in decades, cracks are beginning to show inside the iron-clad structure of the Belarusian armed forces. High-ranking generals are reportedly refusing to follow orders, raising serious questions about the stability of President Alexander Lukashenko's regime. Is this the beginning of the end for his long-standing grip on power, or is this just another bump in the road for a dictator who has managed to cling to power despite massive protests, international sanctions, and global condemnation? Let's break down exactly what's going on and what it could mean for Belarus, its people, and the wider geopolitical landscape. To understand the magnitude of this internal revolt, we first need to look at the history of Lukashenko's rule. Alexander Lukashenko has been the president of Belarus since 1994. Often referred to as Europe's last dictator, he has maintained power through a combination of authoritarian control, suppression of dissent, and a tightly managed state apparatus, including the military. For years, the army has been a cornerstone of his rule, loyal, obedient, and fully integrated into his vision of a tightly controlled state. That's why the recent reports of generals disobeying orders have sent shockwaves not just across Belarus, but throughout Europe. The situation reportedly began to escalate in the aftermath of increased pressure from Russia, Lukashenko's main backer. Following the 2020 protests in Belarus triggered by widely disputed presidential elections, Lukashenko relied heavily on Moscow's political and economic support to keep his regime afloat. In exchange, he offered Vladimir Putin closer military cooperation, border integration, and most controversially, the possible involvement of Belarusian troops in Russia's ongoing conflict with Ukraine. This is where the problem begins. For many high-ranking officials in the Belarusian military, participating directly in a war that they see as Russia's, not Belarus's, is a red line. Over the past several months, intelligence reports and whistleblowers have indicated a growing unease among military leaders who believe that Lukashenko is dragging Belarus into a war that has nothing to do with national defense. This has reportedly led to several generals refusing direct orders to prepare for deployment or to escalate coordination with Russian forces. One of the most significant moments came when a group of retired and active duty generals anonymously released a letter condemning any plans to send Belarusian troops into Ukraine. While anonymous, the letter reportedly included language and insider knowledge that confirmed it came from individuals at the highest levels of the military. The letter stated that involving Belarus in the war would not only lead to needless loss of life, but also destroy what remains of the country's sovereignty. According to sources, some of these individuals have since been arrested or disappeared, but the defiance itself cannot be ignored. The implications of these refusals are enormous. For an authoritarian regime, especially one like Lukashenko's that depends on absolute loyalty, the idea that military commanders would defy orders is more than just insubordination. It's a direct threat to the regime's survival. Authoritarian leaders often maintain their grip on power through fear, loyalty, and the monopoly of force. If even one of those pillars begins to falter, the entire structure can quickly crumble. This rebellion within the military is not happening in isolation. It comes at a time when public dissatisfaction in Belarus remains high. Although the massive street protests of 2020 and 2021 were eventually suppressed through brutal crackdowns, arrests, and torture, the spirit of resistance has not disappeared. Underground opposition networks continue to operate, and civil society, though battered, remains defiant. In fact, some analysts suggest that the military revolt is partly inspired by ongoing grassroots resistance. When generals see that the people have not given up, they may feel emboldened to act according to their own conscience rather than the president's orders. There's also the international dimension to consider. The European Union and the United States have already imposed multiple rounds of sanctions on Belarus for its crackdown on protesters and its close alignment with Russia. These sanctions have hurt the Belarusian economy, created internal pressure, and made life increasingly difficult for ordinary citizens. The threat of international isolation has made some in the military question whether continuing to support Lukashenko is truly in the best interest of the country. Then there's Russia. Vladimir Putin has a vested interest in keeping Lukashenko in power. Belarus provides strategic depth, a buffer state against NATO, and a launch point for military operations. But even Moscow has limits. If the Belarusian military becomes openly mutinous, it could force Russia to intervene directly, something that could overstretch its already burdened resources. Alternatively, the Kremlin might consider replacing Lukashenko with someone more capable of maintaining stability, someone who could control the military and appease the population just enough to prevent total collapse. Either way, the rebellion inside the army has complicated Putin's plans. Another key issue here is morale. Reports suggest that rank and file soldiers in the Belarusian military are also uneasy about being drawn into the war in Ukraine. Many of these soldiers have friends and family across the border, and unlike Russian forces, the Belarusian military has not been conditioned for large-scale foreign invasions. Their training and doctrine have traditionally focused on defense and internal control. Sending them into Ukraine would not only be unpopular, but could lead to mass desertions, low performance, and even internal sabotage. And let's not forget the psychological impact. Once a general refuses an order, it sets a precedent. Others begin to question their own loyalties, and the myth of unquestioned obedience starts to crumble. It becomes a domino effect. Loyalty in authoritarian regimes is often maintained through fear and the assumption that no one will dare step out of line. But once that line is crossed, even by a few, it becomes harder to enforce obedience across the board. So where does this leave Lukashenko? At this point, he's in an extremely precarious position. His political legitimacy has already been severely damaged by the fraudulent election and subsequent crackdowns. His economy is struggling, his people are angry, and now his military, the very force meant to protect his regime, is showing signs of rebellion. To survive, he might be forced to reshuffle the military leadership, launch purges, or double down on repression. But each of these moves comes with risks. A purge could remove experienced commanders and replace them with less competent loyalists, weakening the military even further. Increased repression could provoke a stronger backlash, both from within and outside the country. Some experts are already comparing this situation to other historical moments when authoritarian regimes began to fall apart from the inside. Think of Romania in 1989, when Nicolae Ceausescu's military turned against him, or more recently in Myanmar, where military defections and internal divisions have fueled ongoing instability. While every country's situation is unique, the basic pattern is the same. Once the security forces, especially the military, stop following orders, the regime begins to unravel. The question now is whether this revolt within the army will spread. Will more generals and officers refuse to comply? Will the lower ranks join them? Or will Lukashenko be able to crush the rebellion and reassert control? At this stage, it's impossible to predict with certainty. But what is clear is that something significant is happening inside Belarus, something that could reshape the country's future. For the people of Belarus, this could be a glimmer of hope. After years of oppression, the idea that even powerful generals are beginning to question the regime suggests that change is possible. However, revolutions are messy, and transitions away from authoritarianism are rarely smooth. There are real risks of increased violence, foreign intervention, and even civil conflict if the situation spirals out of control. The international community also has a critical role to play. Supporting the Belarusian people, applying diplomatic pressure, and preparing for a possible transition are all essential. But ultimately, the future of Belarus will be decided by the people within it, those in the streets, those in the underground, and now, incredibly, those in the military. So, is this the end of the Lukashenko regime? Not necessarily, but it might be the beginning of the end. And in authoritarian systems, sometimes that's all it takes. A single crack in the armor, a single voice of dissent, a single refusal to obey. From there, the momentum can build slowly at first, then suddenly. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into global politics and current events. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the military revolt will succeed, or will Lukashenko survive yet another challenge to his rule? We'll be following this story closely, so stay tuned.